Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am so excited to share my conversation today with Tristan Higgins. She is an internationally recognized speaker on LGBTQ plus diversity and inclusion. She is so passionate about diversity and representation that she stepped away from her 24 years practicing law and started her own speaking and consulting firm called Metaclusive. Tristan has a BA in theater from University of California, San Diego, and a JD from California Western School of Law. She began her career as a prosecutor for the San Diego City Attorney and went on to practice entertainment law, also worked in technology, corporate law for the Screen Actors Guild and Sega of America. And then most recently, before she leapt off the cliff and took flight as an entrepreneur, she worked for Sony Electronics. So welcome to the show today, Tristan.
Thank you, Felina. I'm delighted to be here.
Fantastic. Don't you like that? Before she leapt off the cliff.
Well, that's how it feels.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Well, we will certainly get to that. So we gave our listeners a teaser of your background in your bio there, but let's dive in further. Take us along your career path in a little more detail.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about this. I'm a local kid, San Diego. Well, I don't know where everybody's listening from, but I'm in San Diego, and I decided to become an entertainment lawyer when I was trying to figure out, what did I want to do with my life? Because I didn't want to be a professional theater person after all. I was really more interested in having a regular income. And so I went off to law school and absolutely loved school. And I loved being an entertainment lawyer. And I did that for quite some time in a variety of contexts in a variety of cities here in California. And I was always incredibly passionate about diversity and inclusion. There are stories from even when I was in like third and fourth grade, but I had only done it as a side project for all the different organizations that I worked for. And I was organizing their employee resource groups or networking affinity groups. I was helping with their diversity efforts and, all while doing my day job of being a lawyer and handling, the legal business of the organization. And I just really loved it. I love doing that. And I'm guessing the next question is, how did I start to make a transition? Is that where we are?
Well, I want to pause a little bit and spend a little more time, on this, because it's an interesting jump that you did. And I find it interesting.
Okay.
This work in entertainment law, obviously a very interesting field, right? Very California, very Southern California, right?
Yes.
Talk a little bit more. I know you've been passionate about diversity and inclusion throughout your career, but talk a little bit more about the work that you did in that segment. And yes, then how did that transition over to Sony? And with that, were you always based in San Diego, or did, we think of the entertainment industry as Hollywood, right? Did you live up in LA for a while, or were you able to do that work down here?
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I sort of skipped over it.
It's all good. It's all good.
So as a theater kid, I wanted to do entertainment law, and I wasn't able to get a job in entertainment law right out of school, as at the time, most people were not. There's not very many. We didn't have this sort of explosion of content providers and media outlets that we have now. And so I was given the advice and the guidance to go into some form of law that I could do well at, and then to lateral over once I thought I was ready. And so I was delighted to work for the city attorney and to do jury trials and to help teach other attorneys how to do different parts of jury trials using my theatrical expertise and experience. And when there was an opportunity when I thought I had enough to offer to do that lateral move, I ended up moving to LA to work for the Screen Actors Guild. At the time, it was just SAG. Now they've become SAG-AFTRA. But when I was there, I handled mediations and arbitrations for guild members against the distributors and the production houses. So it could have been something as minor as a missed meal period for the entire cast, really holding the producers to the responsibilities that they have to their actors, or something as major as an entire cast not receiving proper residuals. So we handled things like a stolen cell phone, or somebody getting fired. There's really a whole manner of things, and it was wonderful and a blast. And I left the Screen Actors Guild in LA to go to the video game company Sega. And I was really drawn to them because, actors are incredibly creative, and computer nerds are incredibly brilliant, right? Sort of this video games has a combination of both. And that was really neat. And when I was with Sega, I started in LA handling their large amusement division. So if you've ever been into a video game parlor, I'm not sure why the name is escaping me, like an arcade. If you've been to an arcade,
parlor sounds, I like that.
About old fashioned. But if you've been to an arcade, those were the kinds of games I was helping Sega to make at the time, and sort of on the manufacturing side. And then I was able to go up to San Francisco and run legal for Sega in North America. So that was the part of Sega that people mostly think about, right? When they think Sega, they think video games and publishing and things like that. And so I did that with Sega in San Francisco for a while. And I, again, absolutely loved it. But I had some family changes, and I really needed to come back to San Diego. So at that point, I started looking for another position, and I was lucky enough to find a position with Sony Electronics. And here's the kicker, Felina, they were looking for an entertainment and technology lawyer. And wow. I just can't imagine there were that many of us that had the background that I did. I mean, there were certainly way more qualified attorneys for that position, but I happened to have just the right niche. And so they brought me down to San Diego to handle their digital cinema conversion. So, I like to joke, when we used to play charades and you were doing the movie symbol, you would put your one hand up to your eye and the other hand you would spin around your ear. Yep. I realize it's hard to describe over the air. And that's back when film was in big canisters and we had projectors. Well, now they're giant machines that kind of look like refrigerators. And I was brought on to help really handle that conversion from the legal side, obviously, on behalf of Sony Electronics. And again, that was amazing. And I ended up getting to work on that worldwide. And as that window closed for the rollout of that program, because it was really a very elaborate financing arrangement between the movie studios, the theater owners, the AMCs, the Regals that you think of, and Sony. And so I was up in LA every week. I didn't live there. I was here in San Diego, but I was up there on all the studio lots. And I mean, it was a blast. I mean, I'll just tell you, I mean, that's where I'm from. And I love that. And as that program was starting to wind down, I was, happy that Sony wanted to keep me around. And so they shifted me into the really high tech component space. And what that means is, whatever cell phone you have in your hand, at least at the time, there were plenty of Sony components in them. And so one of the things that I was responsible for was the San Jose Silicon Valley branch. It's one of the three, legs of the Sony electronic stool, is selling to other manufacturers, batteries and image sensors, cameras, and different things like that. And so I was working with the biggest consumer electronics companies you can think of, the automotive industry, the medical industry. That's where I developed a passion for artificial intelligence and really high-tech ethical issues, which probably has something to do with the pivot that I made. But I really I dove into that head first, and, was similarly above my head for a while until I could figure it out. And I just, it was just wonderful. So instead of going to LA every week, I was going to San Jose every week. So it was really quite, it was a lot of travel for quite some time. And, yeah, so that's my background, and what else can I tell you about it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I have this visual. So for folks listening, definitely go to Tristan's website, Metaclusive. We'll spell that for you here in a bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can get in touch with Tristan if you're interested in doing that. But Tristan is a lot of her symbolism, and really the symbolism of her business in general is superhero, is of that of a superhero. And as you described what you did for SAG, as it was called at the time, I pictured you as the superhero, protecting all of these actors, right? All of this talent.
Oh, I love
So,
that. Like
yeah.
Captain America, with a big shield out there.
Exactly. Yeah, because that's as you described it. I mean, you were making sure that they got what they deserved, so to speak. They got justice. So
That's exactly right, Felina. And I would say they still do that to this day. One of my dear friends runs the guild, and I know he has a team of passionate lawyers that still do this work, and it's necessary, and it's a wonderful way to hold an entity with really drastically different leverage of power, accountable, and to keep people safe, right? Before there was the guild, there were people, in water for long periods of time. There was no really protection because it wasn't really thought of as important. And so that, it was great fun. And you're right. I did feel a little bit like that occasionally. So hands on your hips, wide leg stance.
Finger wagging. No, I'm teasing. Well, and I'm sure, you mentioned a friend of yours is still running the organization. I mean, good Lord, what actors have had to go through in the last 9 months. I can't even imagine. Just goodness.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was just talking with a friend the other day about how in the beginning of the pandemic, we were just kind of waiting, right? And now we have a wave of music and shows that all reference the pandemic. It'll be interesting for the next, decades. We'll be able to hear things that were created in this period because they've marked that now.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, Tristan, I just cannot stop myself from saying Sega.
It's so funny. I'm glad. I almost said that, but as time has gone on, less people get that reference, and so
yes,
I worry.
They're like, "What did she say?" Sega.
And the same thing from Sony. People say PlayStation, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
For some reason, Sega that Sega is more entrenched in my head than the PlayStation. But anyways, okay.
Yes.
Let's move on.
Okay.
All right. So you were at Sony quite a while. You accomplished a lot in with all of these organizations. What happened? When did you start to kind of, think about this lean out moment, as we like to speak to, and then just talk about that process, that decision-making process to jump off the cliff, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, so I was at Sony for a decade, and I couldn't have been at a better place, especially as far as diversity and inclusion, right? It was really quite a wonderful oasis in the department I was in. And I had the benefit of some great leaders, and I kept learning, right? I mean, and I've always had this belief that when you are learning or having fun in your job, you should stay. If both of those things are happening, well, then that's fantastic, right? But that's the advice I always give to law students and new professionals when they come to me and ask. And well, are you learning, right? Are you learning new things? Are you over your head? Or are you having fun? And in this situation, I was still learning, and I was still having fun, but I had a horrible medical sort of cataclysm happen, kind of like a perfect storm. And I have a lot of ongoing disabilities, and I had some surgery that didn't go very well. And so I ended up out for a very extended period of time. And, to be clear, Sony was incredibly patient. And at some point, I just finally decided that I needed to go ahead and resign so that I could continue to focus on getting better and they could move on, right? Because even though I know other people were covering my matters, the clients are they're just waiting, right? You're
Yeah.
waiting for, is this person coming back or not coming back? And so I just want to be really clear that was, it was a decision that I made. It's not that Sony asked me to. And of course that would be bad. And, I was scared, but I thought, I need to focus on getting better. And if I'm actually not having a place to go back to, that will be a little easier. And then that's when I really started to think about the cliff, right? Because I could have easily gone back, asked Sony to bring me back, or gone to another firm, another corporation.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in my adult life, Felina, that I haven't had a job, right? I've been very lucky to be employed since I got out of school. And I thought, oh my gosh, what do I want to do with what do I want to do when I get older, when I grow up? And I loved being a lawyer, but when I stepped away from it, I thought, okay, maybe I could do something different now. Maybe this is time to do something different. And I just want to make it clear. It's not like, some lawyers, they leave the practice of law because they get burned out or they get tired, but that's not my situation. I mean, I'm still a practicing attorney. I'm actually representing pro bono clients, as I do all of this other work, because I'm still passionate about that. But when it came time to thinking about what I would do day in and day out, I spoke with a career counselor to try to get some, just some help in this process. And the woman said to me, she's so wonderful. She said, well, what would you do if you could get paid for something without any worry about how you get there? And I said, without hesitation, I would be a paid, professional speaker. And she said, on what? And I said, on diversity and inclusion. And then she said, well, why don't you do that? Right. I mean, that was my reaction too. I started laughing and she said, but I'm not kidding. And I said,
well, that's the oldest trick in the book, Tristan. So,
right. Well, I use that with all my clients too, in a different way. But, she said, well, you have to start working towards something, why not start working towards that? You can always go and ask. I mean, not that I would just assume there's jobs waiting for me, but you can always give that up and move on and go back into a corporation or something. And so I have been working on it, and I have been working on it now for about 1.5 years. And I think, as many new businesses, I'm still very, very just burgeoning, just kind of, we'll put it this way. I'm speaking for free a lot, and, I'm able to help clients occasionally, and I'm leaning in, right? Or I'm pivoting, or whatever the word is. And I'm trying, terrified, but like we joked at the beginning, right? That it really does feel like I'm jumping off a cliff. And boy, I never did appreciate all that corporate support until I didn't have it anymore. Not only the salary, of course, and the distinction between working and not working, but the people to help with my travel, and people to help with my calendar, and people to help with my technology when it doesn't work, and all those other brains, to have around you. And I mean, there was a reason that I never did that before. When I was earlier in my career, a lot of my friends opened their own law practice, but I always thought I need to work for somebody else. And I realized I don't need to, but it was a long time coming.
Yeah. Wow. Well, let's dive into Metaclusive, what you do, who you serve, all that good stuff. Give us the overview.
Okay. So Metaclusive is meant to be a professional speaking and consulting firm. It's still just me. And my approach is to helping mid to large size corporations and organizations with their diversity and inclusion efforts. So my ideal client would be, falls into a couple categories. You could be a firm that hasn't done anything yet on diversity and inclusion. Maybe you haven't really realized how important it is, and you just want to get started, and you need somebody like me to come in and help assess the situation, where you are, what you're doing great and what you're maybe not doing so great, and help you with that effort. How do you roll out how do you plan a diversity and inclusion effort? How do you announce it? How do you follow through on it? What does that look like? Or you could be a client that has already spent millions of dollars on diversity and inclusion, like many of our large companies have, but you don't see a lot of change in your workplace, either in morale or in the makeup of your workforce, or innovation is still stalling. And, you just can't keep those amazing Black employees that you've been able to recruit. So you still have a problem, and you want to know what it is. Well, from my perspective, I come in, I talk about diversity and inclusion through the lens of belonging. And we find that when you focus on belonging, you can start to address a lot of those sort of insufficiencies that people are experiencing. I help with keynote I can do keynote addresses, executive coaching one-on-one for CEO, C-suites who want to learn privately rather than in front of their employees. I can do large scale organizational assessments or small project-based guidance. I also now have an offering where I can serve as the outsourced or fractional chief diversity officer, because, one of the problems we have right now, Felina, is there's not enough qualified CDOs in the country, and there's not, it's a newer specialty. And so there's not quite enough people trained up yet. And so one of the things that I am now offering is that I can work as in that role for a company to help them with this stuff on a more ongoing basis, but primarily to help them find their CDO who can take over and then be trained by me. And then I would move on. So there's a variety, workshops, things like that. But that's really what I do. And I think, like I said, my sweet spot is really the larger organizations and corporations, because I speak corporate, right? I understand that corporations do things because it's good for their bottom line, right? I don't go into corporations and start talking about why this is the right thing to do. I talk about how I can save them money and make them money. And that is, I think, the right message for corporate America.
Yeah, absolutely. Tristan, can you share an example of a project you've worked on over the last year and a half, or a particular speech you were asked to give, or anything you want to share that you found, working with this company? You don't have to name the company if you don't want or can't, but just an interesting story of an experience that you've had that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Well, I think that, I had just in this sort of transitioning from from the real world to the virtual world has been interesting. And I find that a lot of people ask me if that's been a challenge. And I think the answer to that is yes and no. Yes, it's a challenge for me to figure out technology and to make the pivot. But it's been good, I think, for a lot of corporations and entities, because they can bring someone like me without having to also deal with travel and with the physical, arrangements of having a large meeting. Because if you're going to bring in an outside consultant, right, you want as many people there as possible. And so my first really large scale event was attended by over 1,800 people. And it was for an engineering firm. And it was very exciting because their CEO is very passionate and is the driving force for their new diversity and inclusion efforts. And, I want to make it clear that it's not that they've just started paying attention, but they've just decided they need to take some very specific actions around support. And so it was exciting for me to be able to support that CEO. The HR team had come to me, but I got to work with the CEO as well as the HR team and the VP of people and prepare a presentation for them based on superheroes. That was really one of the first that I got to do in that vein, and just see the amazing level of interaction in an online format. And that was really interesting to me because, normally, and I know, Felina, you speak so often and you're so great in front of people. You get that back and forth, right? It really helps a lot when you're talking to people, even if it's just eye contact, right?
Yeah.
And so in that online world, it was a little nerve-wracking. And I was really excited to see how that played out and how we were able to, or how I was able to reach people and they were able to ask questions. And so I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant, but that was an exciting experience for me because I thought, okay, I really can do this on a large scale and there's a benefit to it.
Yeah. Oh, I can only imagine with 1,800 people wow, I definitely have not spoken to that many people virtually. I can imagine that would be an interesting, were folks able to interact with you and ask, like, come off mute and ask questions, or was it run more as a webinar type situation?
So yes and no. It was run as a webinar because I find that it's just too difficult to have questions in that kind of environment until a designated period. Yeah. But because we had a moderated, person handling the questions, she was able to, consolidate them, wrap them together so that, 3 people asked the same question, and then we could have the flow. And then, people were able to throw in chat and things like that. So I find that in that situation, it's really important to have someone managing that feature for you. Because as a speaker, I can't look at it. I will tell you.
You're the talent. You don't need to.
That's hilarious. I need my own superhero in front of me. But as I was watching, as they were signing on, there was a little ticker. I could see the people and I thought, oh gosh, maybe I should have covered that up. Cause that was, we were up around 800 and I thought, oh my gosh, then it was 1300. And then I stopped looking because it, went away once the presentation started, but boy, was that exciting.
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Tristan, I have two final questions for you. Both are going to be forward looking. The first question is, what do you see future-wise for diversity and inclusion? What realistically do we see on the horizon, or do you hope we see on the horizon? And then for you specifically in your business, what's upcoming? What are you most excited about?
Okay. Well, I think one of the big issues, I know one of the big issues for diversity and inclusion folks in the near future is going to be loneliness. We really need to deal with the idea and the impact of this pandemic's mental health. It's really caused a mental health crisis. And, it was one thing when you would have employees come into the office every day, they sort of get a break from what's happening around them. You can bring everybody in, give them donuts, even though that sounds sort of trite, but you can do a very specific set of things to improve morale. And when you have a remote, which is going to continue, I think, at least through the next year for many people, you not only do you have team building concerns, but you also need to start thinking about loneliness. Now, of course, it's not a corporation's job to keep their employees safe when they're at home, but now that border is blurred, right? And if I have an employee who gets sick and can't work, then I am impacted. And so I think that's going to be really huge. And I hope that we're going to see some people coming out with some real expertise in that, maybe some blend of people like myself working with psychologists and things to really help with that. And then I think for me, I'm hoping this next year I may do a couple of government contracts, do a little bit of work with some of the California utilities, and really hoping that I can do some work around white privilege. I talk about it a lot, and I'm hoping to do a class or a training around white privilege, and to just, I guess my hope is to kind of demystify and open that discussion up as much as possible without people running for the door, because it's terrifying to talk about those things. So that's what's on my horizon.
That's awesome. And what is your wish? Paint me a picture 10 years from now, what the world looks like, the corporate world looks like, and how do we define having their team, their employees, their vendors, everybody feel like they belong?
Oh my gosh. Well, 10 years from now, if I was, the wizard or the king or whatever the word would be, I would no longer have the discussion. No corporation would need to be told that diversity and inclusion is important. It would be the baseline that it's important. There would be a sort of a groundswell understanding that diversity is good for innovation. It's good for business. It's good for your profit. I think we might have stock exchanges that don't allow any corporation to be listed that doesn't have a diverse board, for example, that doesn't have support for diversity and inclusion efforts. And I think if we're really next level, we would have robust mentoring programs in place and really pipelines to encourage. We need Black women CEOs. We need Latinx male CEOs. We need to have women advancing into the boardroom and into the C-level suite outside of HR, right? Not that there's anything wrong with HR, but we need to be able to have women handling the, CIO, the CTO, the chief technical officer, and the financials, right? That's where we would be 10 years from now. We would be much, much closer to the sort of 49% male female range, just using shorthand for now. We would have, at least corporations in California would have something like 40 or 50% Latinx employees, working their way up the ranks. That's where we would be. I mean, I would love it if 10 years from now, I didn't need to do this work anymore. That would be amazing.
There you go. Work yourself out of a job. No.
Yep.
Out of a business, and then go sail the world. No.
Yes, then go be a judge. Then go and help.
Good. Okay. Done and done. Amazing. I love it. I love it. Well, Tristan, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is absolutely Metaclusive, which is META, like meta human or metadata. CLUSIVE.com. That's the website. The handle for all social media is at Metaclusive, so including YouTube, so you can find me and us there. And on the website, you'll see my phone number, email address, but you can send me an email at Tristan@metaclusive.com. That comes to me, and I will be happy to see it from anybody who's listening.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Tristan.
Lena, thank you so much for having me. I love working with you. I'll just want to say, if I may, and your business has, and your influences specifically has had a huge impact on my ability to do this. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.